Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Oh my goodness! You know that it's so appropriate that we get a thunder and lightning and the howling of wind. You know, Tim, it's hard. It's hard for me to stand up in the sand with the waves coming in, and you know, maybe we ought to head for that lighthouse down there in the distance, just like we did in the movie Sandy Hook Lingerie Party Massacre that came out a few years ago. Because I'm sure everybody will be safe in the lighthouse, right?
I don't know, Tim. That lighthouse, it looks a little spooky.
Well, don't we all like spooky here on Exploring the Bizarre?
I am a little spooky, Tim.
Well, also, happy birthday, Tim.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Well, I would sing happy birthday to you, but do you know that song is copyright?
It is the copyright no longer. So
it is copyright no longer. Well, then, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, fill in the blank. Happy birthday to you.
Well, thank you.
So did you go out for ice cream cake today?
No, not today. We're saving that for Saturday. So it's kind of, you know, like in the middle of the week. So.
Well, there's always room for ice cream cake.
That's what my daughter says. She was upset today that there wasn't any cake in the house. She said, "It's your birthday. Where's the cake?"
There you go. Well, we'll make up for that this evening, I'm sure. One of our speaking of lightning and thunder and foul weather, one of our guests seems to be stuck in the sand somewhere between here and the lighthouse.
Yeah, we were. Holly Mullins was going to be one of our guests tonight, but unfortunately, at the last minute, apparently she's having some weather problems where she lives. That her power has been knocked off. Maybe, hopefully, you know, we may be able to reconnect with her later on this evening. But you know, I guess that large swaths of the country are being hammered over the last couple of days by bad weather.
Well, you know, I think I'd rather see a little wind and rain than have to put up with 117-degree heat.
I think what was it, like 110? I think in Las Vegas today. So
well, you know, I've been.
But it's a dry.
It's a dry heat.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tim. Why don't you introduce our guest for this evening, Michele Lowe?
That's right. Well, thank heavens that Michele can be with us tonight, and I know that Michele. Now you're the chief investigator with the Roswell, Georgia Paranormal Investigations.
I'm one of the lead investigators.
One of the lead investigators?
Yeah, there's about 5 that are lead investigators on the team.
Well, since you're with us on our show tonight, we're just going to say that you're the lead investigator. Heck.
That sounds good.
No second string for us. That's for sure.
No, and so now, how long have you been with Roswell, Georgia Paranormal?
Since about 2009.
Mm-hmm.
I've been investigating with them actively.
Now, were they around before you joined up with them, or did you?
Yes, they were since I think around maybe 2006, but that part of the team dismantled and a new team was born around 2009.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I've often wondered about, kind of like the half life of a lot of these, paranormal groups that spring up. I mean, it seems like now that every city, or heck, even small town, has got their own home based paranormal investigation group. So I just I mean, what do you think? I mean, do they a lot of them, do they just stay around for a year or so and then kind of drift
Well, I've
apart?
been actively investigating since probably 2003. So
Oh,
I do know some of the other teams in the Metro Atlanta area, and they're very good also, real good. And I have actually investigated with them in the past. Um,
When I was growing up, I lived in a house that had poltergeists in it. That's why I'm so strange today. But I
they
don't
came with you.
I don't think that you kind of well, I can't say I didn't mention it to anybody, but you surely didn't run around high school talking about ghosts. I mean, that wasn't quite uh, the thing, but I suppose today it seems to be a lot more popular. I belong to the astronomy club. I wonder if some high schools have ghost chasing clubs.
I would
I,
not doubt that.
yeah, I bet they would now.
It's
Yeah.
funny, when I was a kid, I would actually, me in elementary school, and this is going back a ways, but me and my little girlfriends, we would go, there was two trees out in the playground, and we named one tree the devil tree and the other tree the angel tree. And we'd actually go tell ghost stories at the devil tree until we got scared and then ran over to the angel tree.
That's great. I love that. Well, okay. Well, how long have you then been interested? I mean, there you say when you were in elementary school, you were talking about stuff like that. I mean,
Absolutely.
is this something you've been interested in? Most of your, not all of your life, not yet at least, but for yeah,
But
up
I
to this
have
point.
a good, yeah, probably a very good portion. It's funny. One of my actually my very best friend from elementary school, maybe about a year ago, sent a picture. We used to draw and make books, and it was so funny because the picture was literally, um, I guess you would say investigating, but us in a room and with a ghost flying over us. And so that's going back a ways. But I've always definitely had that interest in the paranormal, even before I knew technically the term paranormal or what it all entailed.
My eyes lit up when I saw. I think I had asked one of the first questions that I asked you when we became friends on Facebook
Uh-huh.
is whether you had any interest or had ever investigated haunted lighthouses. For some strange reason, I am just so fascinated by lighthouses, Tim. You know that. Well, of course you do,
Well,
because
yeah.
like I said, we made that movie. And of course, we changed the title because it was Sandy Hook Laundry Party Massacre, and people thought we were naming it after the high school where the massacre took place, which had nothing to do with it because that's in Connecticut. And our Sandy Hook is in New Jersey.
Well,
Never
and
heard of
came
the other.
and
Yeah,
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 and
never
came
heard of
years
the other one.
before.
Yeah, and in fact, there are seven Sandy Hooks in North America. I actually did a little research on this. Seven Sandy Hooks in North America, six in the United States, and one in somewhere in Canada. And of course, the Sandy Hook where we shot the film or around the lighthouse is on a military base in Sandy Hook, New Jersey. Right? It's not a very tall lighthouse. I'm not even sure how they could see the ocean from there, but they managed to do that. Anyway, there's something in my soul that just that and the candy bar you're eating. Uh, there, there, there's something. There's just something about a lighthouse that gets my blood running cold. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So now,
My
uh,
blood runs cold.
cold, yes. So anyway, Michelle, I see that you investigated or know about a lighthouse in the town St. Pedro in California, where you were born.
Yes. Now, I never investigated it, but growing up, we always knew about it and that it's purported ghosts there. So we would always go over there at night to see if we could see her. There was also a ship that had uh, ran aground and sank. And though there were no casualties, apparently a lot of people went out there diving, searching, I guess, for what may have been on the ship. And
Now,
I guess some of those divers perished.
where is San Pedro?
San Pedro, it's on the California coast. And it's interesting because there's another lighthouse, speaking of smaller lighthouses, that is about 8 miles away from that lighthouse, that also has a little bit of a haunted history. But it was also, just to kind of give a perspective of where it was, the site of the Battle of Los Angeles was also there on that coastline.
Okay.
So it's kind of around the Long Beach area.
I know where that is.
Yeah.
Why is it, would you say, Michele, with your background in parapsychology and the paranormal, that lighthouses and insane asylums seem to be the most haunted places as a rule? Insane asylums, I can see that.
Insane asylums make sense, yeah, but a lighthouse, not
Yeah,
live there, yeah.
yeah.
You know,
I
a
don't
lot.
know.
I think, maybe there's a lot of residual energy in places like that, a lot of places with a lot of sorrow. Now, with a lighthouse, it's totally different. I don't know. I know it's, with it being just a place of isolation, I guess that could get very depressing, and maybe that holds the energy somehow.
Oh, I'm putting up my collar. I could feel the cold draft. There's one lighthouse story in particular. You know about the three watchmen, the lighthouse watchmen who disappeared. Do you know the location of? Is that off of England, Tim? Do you know the story about how?
I,
Yeah, how every
I'm not certain that I heard that one.
well, okay, well every 3 or 4 months, I guess there would be a changing of the guard. It was a live-in lighthouse, but it was off the coast. It wasn't the type of thing that was on the coast. So they had to take a boat out to the lighthouse, and they lived there for several months at a time. And then when the new crew came on several months later, even though the light was working, the lighthouse keepers and maintenance people had totally disappeared. And it was the same type of thing, as on the Marie Celeste on the boat, where there was dinner on the table, and I think maybe even a smoldering pipe or something like that, but no sign of the three men. They had totally disappeared, and it wasn't, as I recall, there wasn't any particular rough seas or anything like that.
It was Tim. It was the Eileen Moore Lighthouse Keepers,
Mhm.
and it was part of the Flannan Isles.
Flannan Isle.
Yes, yeah. And Eileen Moore is Gaelic for Big Island.
Aha.
And yes, you're right. It was in December 1900 that these three lighthouse keepers had just mysteriously disappeared.
Yeah, that story has, of course, mysterious disappearances have always been a favorite of mine. We've had Joshua P. Warren on the show a couple of times, and isn't it his uncle that disappeared from the porch? He was out there.
That's correct.
He was out there rocking, and when I guess the family went out to invite him, to tell him it was time to eat, the rocking chair was still a rocking, but the uncle was gone, and he was never seen again. He had just totally disappeared. So now, Michele, also there's another infamous lighthouse known for its haunting in St. Augustine.
Yes, I've actually been there. I've not investigated it.
That's
but
Florida, right? Florida.
Yes, yeah, it's up at the northern end, about 30 minutes from Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And what makes that lighthouse haunted?
Well, I know that there's a family history there. I believe that many people have said that they've seen the ghost of the daughters who lived there, of one of the keepers there. Mm-hmm. And they've heard the little girls also. I know when the ghost hunters went there, they were very lucky in capturing a lot of tangible evidence. The shadow figure up at the top of the lighthouse. And what was interesting about that is that there was a motion sensor light that would go off if you got within, a certain vicinity of it. And this figure was up there. The door was locked, so there was no way for them to go out to the outside of the lighthouse. And yet they, on video, captured this figure, and at no time did that motion sensor light go off either. So,
Well, now,
Yeah, that was a good episode.
that was a good episode.
Let me ask you a candid question. I am not a big fan of a ghost. I was going to say Ghost Hunters, but not that particular show. Any ghost show on TV. In fact, most of the shows on TV that deal with the paranormal and even UFOs, I did think UFO Hunters was good. And there's another one, Faked or Fact or Fake or something like that.
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed that one.
That one I think was very good because they actually tried to duplicate the phenomena to see if it was duplicatable or if it might have been had some truth to it, legitimacy. But somehow I can't quite get into those shows because I know for a fact I've gone on some ghost hunts. My main thing is UFOs, but I've gone on some ghost hunts, and you can't expect to have phenomena all the time. Also, too, I hate anything that's continuously shot in nighttime vision. It drives me quirky. It just, I don't know, puts me in the insane asylum or something like that. How do you pick and choose? I mean, you probably watch these shows. You've been on a few yourself.
Well, I was featured in one episode of a haunting, but I used to watch them. But once you do it so often, it's like kind of like watching work or something. So you kind of stop watching them after a while. Not that I didn't enjoy them; they're definitely, especially in the beginning, they were fun, especially with ghost hunters. Definitely interesting to watch. But just moving forward, I've heard a lot of controversy, and just different things. And you're right. I mean, a lot of it's a sitting game and visual and hours of not getting anything. So,
in fact, I often say, if a ghost jumped out at me and said boo, I would probably try to walk around it. and like I say, I did have quite a bit of poltergeist phenomena in in my house growing up. There were doors opening and closing and lights going on and off. And I remember on one occasion there was a piece of chinaware, a plate. It's an ordinary plate, and it slid across the table and it drifted onto the floor, and it didn't break. It wasn't made out of plastic or anything, so it should have possibly broken, but it didn't. And other people, visitors to the house and all, had heard the sound of a baby crying in the stairwell between our apartment and the apartment upstairs. And we did a little bit of research, and we found out that a woman had died during the I think it was diphtheria, like right after World War One, Tim, 1917, 1918, there were something like 40 or 50 million people around the world who died. I mean,
well, there was the Spanish flu epidemic right at the end of World War One.
Yeah. Well, anyway, a lot of people died, and apparently the woman and her baby died right around the same time, and they had a wake in the house, and they put the child in the arms of the deceased mother. I don't know if anybody would do that today, but I guess for a wake at that period of time, that's kind of was acceptable.
I've seen a lot of the death photos from I guess back in the 1800s, and they're very interesting. I mean, sometimes you look at them and you can't tell who the deceased person is.
Very, very, very strange and spooky. But now we are coming up for a break in a few minutes, but I do want to ask you, and Tim and I want to ask you, what have been your own paranormal experiences, background?
As far as experiences, I've seen many shadow figures, heard disembodied voices, been around mild poltergeist activity. Um, Trying to run all the different things I've had through my head.
Was this before you got into ghost investigations or prior? Like when you were a kid growing up.
Oh, no, both. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. When I was pregnant with my third son, I was woken. This is when I still lived in Southern California. And I was woken by something that touched me. And I mean, literally out of a dead sleep, at about 8-9 months pregnant and on a very low waterbed frame, regular bed, but on a waterbed frame, very low to the ground. It literally woke me out of a dead sleep. I literally bounded out of the bed. Now the room was illuminated by the bathroom light. So it was dark, but just, a little illumination from the bathroom light. And as I was literally jumping out of bed, I saw this black shadow figure. It had long hair, but I could still see that it was a male. And it kind of, for lack of a better description, sucked up into itself and whisked into the closet. And what was interesting is I yelled for my daughter, and she came down the hallway, and I said, "It's in the closet, it's in the closet." And she turned on the light. Of course, there was nothing in the closet. Mm-hmm. But she had said that right before I had started yelling, and she had heard me, she was in the living room, that we had 3 dogs and 3 cats, that they had all started acting very strange right before that had happened. Mm. And I'd had a lot of different interesting experiences. One memorable 2-part experience I had was going up to the Helter Skelter house up on Cielo Drive. Yeah. We had went up there. We were curious teenagers, and we went to go check it out. And the home was still there. It's not there anymore, and the old gate. And the first time we went up there, we didn't really have any experiences. But when we were leaving, we encountered this gigantic black dog. And I do mean, my friend had a Nova, the Nova, mm-hmm. and the dog the head was well up to the window there. And it was literally chasing our car, and we were getting up 35, 40 miles an hour. And this dog was viciously at the side of the car chasing us. We drove out of the neighborhood we were in and drove a few miles down the road, pulled into another neighborhood to calm down. And I mean, this was literally a few miles down the road.
Well, we're going to find out. We're going to find out what happened to that big dog as soon as we come back from our very short break with Michele Lowe. And I'm Tim Beckley, and Tim Swartz is on the other end. Happy birthday.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with 2 of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we are talking with Michele Lowe about ghostlies and ghoulies and long-legged bullies and things that go bump in the night. Now, Michele, before we went to this to our break, you were telling us about you and a friend had gone up to visit, or I suppose to snoop.
Yes, that's pretty much what we were doing.
Snoop around the. It would have been Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate's house.
Yes.
Where the Manson murders took place. Now, as you said, I mean, the house at that point, I mean, I think it remained empty from that point on after the murders took place. I think there were some houses, maybe on the property or nearby, but you wouldn't think there'd be anybody would have a dog like that.
Oh no. And reflecting back, it was interesting because as I had mentioned, we went, at least a few miles down and pulled into another neighborhood to regroup, because we were, from more towards Orange County area. So we weren't close to home. So we were regrouping. And just as we were calming down, this dog appears literally out of nowhere and starts chasing us again.
Wow.
I mean, we beelined out of this neighborhood, and that time we made our way to the freeway and on our way back home.
Well, now, do you think that the dog was a real dog, or
No,
was it a hellhound, a phantom
I
hound?
swear to
Black
you
shuck.
that reflecting back, now then I wouldn't have thought that because I didn't know what a hellhound was. But looking back, I often wondered if that's what we encountered. And that was only kind of, it was interesting because when I did research on them, just because I really thought that there was just something very, unnatural about that whole situation, especially for the dog to appear out of nowhere, chase us in the first place, and then for us to go a few miles down the road and it shows up again, in this other random neighborhood. That's just, that it just didn't make any normal sense. And doing the research, it's interesting because, they say that they are collectors of souls, and Benedict Canyon has this huge haunted history, not only with the Helter Skelter house and even the neighboring houses, but just other neighbor homes in those neighborhoods also. Where Paul Byrne and Jean Harlow lived was also the house that Jay Sebring lived in. There was ghostly manifestations there. And we actually went back to the house, me and two other friends, because of course I had to take them back after that. And we drove up the narrow driveway, and it's a very narrow driveway. It's almost like a one-way driveway. It's very narrow. And what was interesting is as we were, and this was another night, different time, and we're slowly pulling up the driveway again. And as we're approaching that big gate, security gate, we noticed this black shadow figure standing at the gate, and it looked like a male. And so, of course, we freaked out, and we start trying. My friend Lynn, who was driving, starts doing this, like, U-turn, trying to, turn the car around. The whole time, me and my other friend are looking at the shadow figure. It never moves. I mean, it just stationary, standing at the gates, just looking at us. And then as we're starting to, leave the driveway and leave, it just vanished.
But it was human.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It actually looked like a young male, and I honestly thought that it was maybe the apparition of Stephen Parent, who was the first victim at the home, who was shot by Tex Watson. Because, it literally appeared out of nowhere. It never moved. It just stood there, literally dead still. And as we were leaving and trying to, get out of there, it just literally vanished right in front of us. So it was just very strange. And it was kind of weird how, researching, and this is more recent that I started researching all this because I wrote a book about all this, and it's not published yet. I'm getting ready to submit it. But when I was reflecting all this, that's when I started thinking that could have been a hellhound. And it was interesting, with all the haunted history in Benedict Canyon, one of the things it says is that these hellhounds will go out and look for lost souls, so I just thought it was very interesting. Can I prove any of that? Of course not. But those were my experiences.
Well, we've been gathering. In fact, we have a book coming out. Wouldn't know we have a book coming out, Tim, right?
Yes,
we have a book we have a book coming out. It's on the cryptid creatures from the dark domains: dogmen, devil hounds, phantom canines, and the invincible Sherlock Holmes. Because, of course, most people don't realize the Hounds of the Baskerville was based on a real case of a demon dog prowling the moors. But we've gotten quite a few cases. We've had some guests on the show here who have talked about Dogman, who is a 7 or 8 feet tall canine who seems sometimes to walk on his hind legs. And,
yes, I've definitely heard of Dogman.
Yeah, okay. Well, and he's supposed to have a kind of the body of Arnold Schwarzenegger and the face of a dog. Or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure. Well, we'll never get it. We'll never get Arnold on as a guest, but he's a Republican anyway. So
well, I'll tell you an interesting story here, real quick, Tim. I was on another program the other night.
Oh yeah, Clyde show. Yeah,
Clyde Lewis,
he's a friend. Yeah, he's a friend of ours. We can mention him. Yeah.
And we were talking about, I guess, near Davenport, Iowa. There has been a lot of people seeing Men in Black type of figures. Now, I mean, not when I say Men in Black, people automatically think of like Bender's Men in Black, or maybe the movie Men in Black. But these are people who are seen dressed like in dark overcoats, walking alongside of these country roads. Sometimes even just walking out in the middle of the road. In front of cars. Well, while I was doing a little research before I went on the show, I ran across an interesting story from that same county about a year previously. Last year, there was a local farmer who, in a couple of night period, lost almost 40 goats. To some kind, they said it was a dog because they could hear it barking. They never really saw it, though, because all they saw was like a large, dark shape. The farmer shot at it a couple of times, but was never able to hit it. Yet this animal managed to kill 40 goats in just a couple of nights. Now, that's...
That's strange, because would that be the nature of an animal to do that, to kill so many animals? It sounds like it was killing for sport more than...
Very much so. And, a goat is not a small animal unless it was pygmy goats. And these were regular sized goats that I inferred from the newspaper report. Yet this dog or animal or whatever it was able to kill all these animals in a very quick period. A dog could maybe take down one goat, and that would be about it. And I speculated on the show whether or not this animal could have been like a black shuck type of creature, and then the result of this almost like a blood sacrifice, that maybe raised spirits or something. I mean, if you were in England 200 years ago, that's exactly what would have been thought. Here you had a bunch of livestock killed, and then start seeing ghostly apparitions nearby. Yeah, people would think that there were, like devil worshiping going on.
Well, even on the banks of the Loch Ness, where the Nessie has been seen, there have been over these centuries livestock either disappearing or carcasses left behind, and some people accuse a Nessie of coming up on land and grabbing I guess a sheep probably there, but that's not the case. I doubt it very much. Usually aqua creatures don't come on land and eat sheep. I don't know. Unless they're a mutton for punishment.
All right. Good night, folks.
That's why I get the big bucks here. Yeah.
Okay.
That's why our ratings soar through the roof, right?
Something soars through the roof.
Anyway, Loch Ness, I spent some time there, and there were all sorts of weird things that were going on around Loch Ness. The Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, I don't know, lived there, in the house that Crowley had rented, and there were all kinds of strange things that were going on there. In fact, fellow came over to the bed and breakfast where I was staying, who did he was the milkman. Yes, they still have milkmen in England, or at least they did it in the 1980s. And he said, I don't drive past there anymore. And I said, well, why is that? He says, there's something spooky about it. Every time he drove by the Bollenshire house where, all this weird stuff was going on, the dog, his pet dog that sat in the front seat with him, would try to get under the front seat and ripped it apart, the upholstery in the bottom of the seat and all of that. So he said he just doesn't drive by there anymore. But there were several people that came over to the house, and other people that just reported to me that they had seen UFOs over the loch. So we did a little research and found out that not only had there been sightings in decades past, but there had even been men in black types who had stood on the shore watching people go about their observations, which is kind of strange. Why would the men in black be too interested in what goes on in the lock? But perhaps they are uh, akin to the creature. MIB and Nessie. What a group that. Anyway, Michele, you've had some UFO type experiences. Is that correct?
Well, I definitely have had some interesting dreams, but I did have one particular, actually a couple. One evening I went outside at my old house, and I looked up, and it would, in comparison, look like a star as far as size and distance. And there was this thing moving erratically, just all over, figure eight, all over in the sky. And of course, my boyfriend was with me at the time, and I'm like, look. The minute he looks, it stops, of course, but then it took off straight in a beeline, and as it started moving, let's see, I'm thinking eastward, it just vanished. So he did get to see part of it. He didn't get to see the erratic movement, but the fact that it was moving the way it was and completely stopped and then just went in a straight line going east and disappeared was very interesting. But I did have a real recent experience where I woke up for some reason about 1:30. It was actually at 1:38 in the morning because it was a weeknight. And when I wake up at weird hours on a weeknight, I always look at the time and wonder how much more time I have to sleep. And so as I'd looked at the clock, and I was just getting ready to lay back down when there was a bright light kind of coming in through the window. And I thought it was, I figured it was the moon. And I live on a very dark street, and there's no street lights. So I'm not the type to peek out the window because I'm afraid there'll be an eyeball or a face looking back at me. But for some reason, I'm like, I'm going to open my blinds and look. And it looked like the moon. And so I'm like, and this is another thing that was out of character. I'm like, I'm going to grab my camera and take a couple pictures real quick of it. And so even though I was still kind of half asleep, I was able to get 2 pictures. But what was strange is that it somehow moved out of my line of sight because I would have kept taking pictures. It was just so bright. And I thought to myself, even though I was still half asleep, I'm like, can the moon move that fast? I know we're, we're moving, but it shouldn't have disappeared that fast out of sight. It was just very strange. And the next day I decided to just look at the pictures, and one looks like a cell phone blurry picture that you would get of the moon. But the second picture, however, was, it was still that same shape, but now it was broken up into 6 almost equal parts. It's very hard to explain, and I could even shoot it to you guys via email. But it was just so at that moment, I knew what I thought was the moon was not the moon. And so I still have no explanation for that picture. It literally looks like the moon had been diced into 6 almost equal pieces, although the pieces on the top, the 3 on the top are more oblong, whereas the 3 on the bottom, even though it's still forming a circle, are smaller.
Well, that just proves that the moon is made of Swiss cheese.
I am going to try to send it to you because I think you'd find it interesting, and I would definitely love your opinion.
A lot of people report, though, I mean, that they will see what they first think is, one solid object that will suddenly, break up into a number of different, smaller objects. They'll fly around. Sometimes they'll fly away. Oftentimes they'll fly back together again into one object again, which will then disappear. So, I mean, your description of your picture sounds very similar to, to these reports and other pictures that I've seen.
Yeah, it was definitely very strange. And when I first saw the first picture, I'm like, oh, yeah, I got another good blurry picture of the moon, but it was when I saw that second picture, I'm like, oh, wait, that's definitely not the moon. Let's see, I'm literally trying to send it over to you.
Well,
but I
okay,
can't, but I could not explain to you what it is, other than It does not seem to be the moon.
Well, as I said, it was something out of place in the sky, and that's a lot of people try to attach some kind of meaning or identification to something like that, and you really can't. Like you said, it was a light in the sky that looked like the moon. A lot of people would say, well, it was a spacecraft. I saw a spacecraft in the sky. Other people would say, well, no, that's that's the fairy ship, bringing the wee folk down, down to earth. Others would say, oh, nope, it was angels. I saw angels. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, when I saw it, I definitely thought it was the moon. I just thought it was strange that it had disappeared, off the horizon so easily, from my line of sight so quickly, because it was literally from the time I got up, got my phone, went to the window, shot 2 pictures, and it was gone.
Now, how long ago was this?
Literally just probably a few months ago. Not long. To several months ago.
Did you find by chance that you started having added paranormal experiences after this incident, or did everything?
One thing that was definitely strange is I have 2 dogs, a pit bull and a chihuahua, and after that had happened, I was trying to go back to sleep, and my chihuahua for some reason was staring at my bedroom door and shaking uncontrollably, and usually the only time he shakes is if it's cold. And it wasn't cold. and usually if he thinks, either of them, if they hear a sound, or think that there's someone near or in the house, they're going to bark. And he was not barking at all. He was just shaking and staring intently at the hall, which I just noticed and thought was definitely odd. Not putting anything into it that, there was something or somebody out there, but I just definitely noted that it was odd and out of character for him.
There are a lot of, say, people who investigate ghosts and hauntings who want nothing to do with UFOs because they think that's crazy stuff. And there's a lot of people who are, investigate UFOs who think the same thing, about ghosts and hauntings. I mean, what about you? I mean, what's your opinion?
Well, I love both. And what's interesting is because of that separation, I think that both sides are missing out on maybe some really key pieces on how they may actually fit together more than we think. Hearing little pieces of information about people, who, a lot of people who are in the know about UFOs have talked about how the Greys or other aliens may be somehow linked to demons, which I found very fascinating because I had a case which resulted in 3 exorcisms. And through this case, I captured a picture, and in it, it looks like a partial, it was caught with a full spectrum camera, partial, like almost, for lack of a better description, bulbous head with a dark eye, but it's only partial because it was like as if it was looking into my camera, which I assure you, I did not see anything looking into my camera when I took it. And it was on a tripod when I was taking the pictures.
It was photobombing you.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's a very strange picture, and I definitely have wanted other people to take a look at it because I did another paranormal case that was down in South Georgia. And what was interesting is, again, it was another case I'm shooting with the full spectrum camera, and it's on the tripod. It's stationary. I'm just literally pushing the button. And when reviewing the pictures in sequence, I'm shooting towards a kitchen and there's nothing. And then something peeks out the corner. And it was very dark. I had to lighten it to see it better. And then in the next shot, it's gone. So, the little flip books that show motion. Well, if you look at the pictures 3 in a row, you could see the motion of something peeking out. And what was extremely interesting to me is that it looks, again, like this bulbous head thing with this dark black eye, but this time it has a ring around its head. And this is not matrixing. It's pretty obvious what you're looking at. And of course, like I said, I will definitely be happy to send those to you too to check out.
Well, Tim,
yeah, I'd like to see those.
Absolutely.
Tim, didn't we have this case up in New England? Remember Stella Lansing?
Oh, yes.
We posted that on our a YouTube channel, Mr. UFO Secret Files.
Right.
And she had the uncanny ability, really uncanny ability, of standing there with her 8 millimeter movie camera, which is a lot harder to fake anything on, believe you me, than it would be on a tape deck today. By all means, wouldn't you say? But she had the uncanny ability to take photographs of once in a while a strange object in the sky. But when the film was developed, there'd be all sorts of weird phenomena on there that were not visible to the naked eye when she took the pictures.
She said that she could tell when there was going to be something going on. She would just have this innate feeling, and she'd go out to a location and a lot of times just start filming areas of the sky. Other times, well, and I often wondered, whether or not, the phenomena whether or not she was filming phenomena or if she was somehow producing the phenomena on the film, much like the Ted Sirius from Chicago.
Yes.
What they call him, the psychic photographer, I think.
Oh yes, with his gizmo.
With his gizmo, yeah.
Gizmo, yeah. Well, the gizmo was he would hold the gizmo to his forehead, and then put the camera over. I don't know. That seemed a little bit more open to dispute anytime you use a gizmo.
Well, the gizmo was like a rolled up a piece of paper,
or something. Yeah.
Well, and somebody said that he would palm, say, like a marble that had like a piece of film taped around it, and that's what would give like his psychic photographs that kind of ethereal look to it.
Well, because kind of like in the case of Billy Meyer, people would find the photographs later in books.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, a lot of some of Ted's photographs, they were never able to trace.
Oh, that's true. Yes.
Where the photographs were taken, and a lot of them, the angles were extremely bizarre. Like they were taken up in the air, sideways, or something. It was strange. Oh, I hear the music.
Well, we're going to be back because we've got a heck of a lot more to talk about, including EVP. And I guess everybody knows what EVP stands for. It stands for Electronic Voice Phenomena.
We'll be back.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you.
That's great. And for those of you who don't know, that was our producer Tina singing me a happy birthday. I think she's got a bit of a cold.
I think I still would rather have Marilyn Monroe singing to me.
Oh no, that one was perfect. Thank you, Tina. That was excellent. I love that.
Well, who can say that we don't run a very serious Exploring the Bizarre here?
Yes,
because we certainly do, and we love the subject. We love the subject so much that we can kid around every once in a while, because certainly there's nothing that will take the chill or the fright off of a spooky night better than a laugh. Wouldn't you say that, Tim?
That's right. And here in Southern Indiana, we could definitely use a little chill right now. So,
Hey, Tim, I don't know if I've ever asked you or questioned you, or maybe it's my senior moment, but did you ever have, I mean, how the heck did you, why are you doing this show?
Why am I doing this show? Because you
Yeah.
asked me to.
Well, I mean, it goes deeper than that. You
Oh,
and I have
sure.
been working together for going on a decade, maybe longer.
Oh, yeah, longer than that.
Longer than that, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Since like the early 1990s.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So,
Uh,
well, with me, Tim, what got me interested in the subject was after I was forced to give a like an oral report in front of my third grade class about UFOs. Our teacher would randomly choose articles from a what was called the Weekly Reader, I think, from Scholastic Books. Classrooms would get those, and they had like the lower.
you sure it wasn't the Weekly World News?
No, it wasn't the Weekly
No.
World News. I'm not. I think it may have been around at that time.
No, it wasn't. No, and you're right. It was the Scholastic put it out. It
Yeah,
was
Scholastic
the
Books.
yes
It was a Weekly Reader.
Weekly Reader. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But it was like an aggregate of news reports, from that week, and kind of, this would have been like around 1968, and there had been a UFO flap, going on in the United States since around 1967. It was starting to wane by 68, but it's still, I mean, it would still make the news. So I had to give, like write a report about it and give it in front of the class. I mean, I had no real knowledge of that kind of stuff at that point. And I got I got pegged from that day on as like the flying saucer guy. I was the guy who believed in Martians and stuff like that. And I mean, I had no real interest or knowledge. But what got me interested then was that people would joke about it, make fun of you, while other people were around. And then later, when it was just like, when you're just by yourself, they'd come back and they'd say, I don't believe in this stuff, but, and, my family and I, we saw a UFO. Our house is haunted. Insert weird item here, and that's what really got me going and interested is the people who would have these experiences, because I mean, you can read about these things and and all of that, but it's these like hidden accounts. I can't really think of any other way of putting it. People who aren't seeking publicity. They don't they don't go to the newspaper. They don't go to the television stations about their weird experiences, but they have them anyway. And gosh, I think that maybe practically everybody at one time or another has had some kind of unusual experience that, with the exception of, like people like us, Michelle, Tina, yeah, they have no idea what had happened to them. I mean, they have no context to like pigeonhole their experience. And so when they can find somebody that they can go to and say, I don't know what happened to me. What happened, what happened to me? And to get somebody who will listen to them and not laugh at them and won't say that they're crazy and that they're able to tell their story to, a lot of people they'll go off happy then. They may never tell anybody else again. But the fact that they were able to come to me and tell me their story, and I would listen to them and not laugh at them and say, yes, you're not alone. Other people have had the very same thing. That just really, that'll make a person's life. And that's, that really what got me going.
Well, let's see, growing up or after you graduated, you became a journalist and a producer, TV producer.
Yeah, when I was in college, I actually, to make a little extra money to buy school books and stuff, I actually wrote a few UFO articles for some of the smaller ones. I tried to get into like the Saga UFO reports, I had a couple of articles published in some of the other ones, like I can't even remember now.
Official UFO.
It wasn't official UFO, but it was, some of
Close.
those
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. And, but all I had, all we had back then was typewriters, even an electric typewriter, which I hated working on. And then once I got working in television, my paranormal writing kind of went to the wayside, though I kept up my research and investigations, as you well know. I mean, when I was living in Dayton, Ohio, I actually, investigated a poltergeist house in Springfield, Ohio, with some very interesting rocky apports going on.
Yeah, that's the one where the rocks actually fell from the ceiling.
Right, that's correct. Yeah. I mean, just a rather mundane. Yeah, for a lot of people, they wouldn't think of a poltergeist experience as being mundane, but I mean, it was kind of like typical at this house. Wraps on the wall, furniture, and small things moving around. Some voices being heard. And then when I went there with my television equipment, all my charged batteries were dead within a minute after I got into the house. I mean, we're talking about like these big NiCad batteries that that we used to use on these cameras and recorder packs. I mean, and these things would they could power a camera for a couple of hours, and they were dead within a minute or so. And,
Same type of phenomena you would find when a UFO flies by.
Well, and I'm sure that Michele probably, if she hasn't had this experience herself, she's heard about it. Where you'll go into a haunted house with electronic equipment, and the batteries will die right away. Yeah, the electronics will screw up. It's amazing how it happened. Of course, at that time, this would have been 1983, 84. People really weren't talking about it that much then, because taking electronics into a haunted house, you weren't doing it that often.
Well, speaking of electronics, Michele, I believe you were telling me earlier in an email that you have quite a collection of EVP, electronic voice phenomena.
I do have some definite good EVP. Absolutely. Through the years, I've been able to collect a lot of really good EVP, and I just seem to, for some reason, be very lucky in capturing them. I could probably go anywhere and capture an EVP. And again, a lot of them, usually with our team, we'll only, when giving our results, will only use Class A, sometimes Class B if it's, relevant.
Well, how do you distinguish that?
By the clearness, the crisp, how clear and crisp the EVP is. If it's a Class A, it would sound pretty much as clear as me and you. There would be no mistaking what it was being said.
Well,
whereas if you're going into
what percentage of the? I mean, I haven't. Well, I've heard quite a few EVP. In fact, in one of my conferences, I had. Do you know who Mark Macy is?
I'm not certain.
Mark Macy, he's the one that's been collecting voices that come over TV sets and computers.
Oh, okay.
That's IT communications, I believe.
I've actually had an experience with that myself on a 2 landline. Me and my sister were talking on the phone, and I've had an experience where a voice came through the phone. I mean, literally, it was not, in the background of either conversation. It literally came through the phone when we were talking about an experience that she had in her home, a ghostly experience.
What did it say?
Well, what it happened? Well, it's interesting because it didn't say anything. It was a scream. Now, what had happened was she had been trying to reach me for several days, and she finally reached me at our home home phone. And she told me that she was at home alone and her and the two dogs were in the bedroom. It was around 4 a.m. when she heard, a footstep and a drag, footstep and a drag, footstep and a drag. So she said she worked up, the courage to peek out under the covers. And she said that she saw this little girl there and at the door. And she said she was transparent, but she could see that she had like a little blue dress with an apron on and blonde curly hair. And so she closed her eyes, thinking maybe she was dreaming, opened them again. She said this time the little girl was closer and a little bit more solid. And so she closed her eyes again and did it one more time. And the girl was a little bit closer and a little bit more solid. And then, this time she, is trying to sit up, blinks again, and the girl's gone. Well, flash forward to the phone call when she finally reaches me and we're both sitting there and she's telling me what had happened. And all of a sudden, the phone just goes fuzzy, shh, with that white noise. And it just takes over. Our voices go away and you can just hear this loud white noise. And then there's this blood-curdling scream. And then it clears. And before we could even say anything, the white noise kind of builds up again. And the scream comes through, another scream, just like it, blood-curdling scream. And then it just was silent again. And when that happened, I knew what a chill up your spine meant. It literally sent almost a painful chill up my spine.
What is all the screaming about?
Well, what was interesting is I said, "Did you hear that?" And I didn't say what. I said, "Did you hear that?" And she said, "Yeah, that girl screamed." And I'm like, "Yeah." And so I think that this little girl who was in her home, she said that there was something wrong with her foot, with one of her legs. And so I think that's why it was like a footstep and a drag. So our theory, and of course that's all we can go with, was that maybe this little girl had, somehow died a traumatic death and was looking for help of some sort or something. We don't know. We really, of course, don't know. But she had this experience. And then when we're talking about it on the phone, I still have no explanation other than we both felt that it was the little girl somehow trying to come through the phone line, but it was just a blood-curdling scream twice.
Well, I guess there have been cases recently, or people have collected them, where people who supposedly have passed away, like in accidents or fires or explosions or something, have sent messages on their cell phone after they have passed on.
My boyfriend, when he passed away, it was interesting. Now, I didn't get any messages, but it was very strange how at work, after I had gone back to work, the phone kept ringing at the office just incessantly. And we would answer it, me and the other woman who worked there. And it would either be nobody on the line or it would be just white noise in the background, the white noise sound.
Yeah.
And I just knew it was him trying to communicate because it was completely unexpected. And I just really felt that was him, even though I did not actually hear a verbal message. But it was just very, very, very strange.
Well, how about this incident that took place a couple of years ago? And this actually even made the news, where a woman had driven her car, I guess by accident, into a creek or a river. And she was deceased, but the baby was in there.
Yeah, I think that was just recent.
Well, it was in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Like last year.
Yeah.
Yes. But I do remember that. I was just talking about that.
Yeah. Anyway, they heard what appeared to be the voice of the mother telling them that her, to rescue her baby, but it turned out that she had already drowned.
Been deceased, yes, and it was interesting, especially interesting because it was the emergency workers who heard it.
Yes.
So that for whatever reason gave it a little bit more
credibility. Yes.
Exactly.
Well, it was caught on video too.
Oh, the voice
actor. One of the emergency workers had a gosh, I don't know what it would be. I suppose a GoPro or something like that. But there was a video being recorded at the time, Maybe it was one of the policemen who had on like a body camera. I think that's what it was. Now that I think about it, and you could it's not very clear, but at one point you hear a voice say, like "help us." I think is what it was, and then one of the emergency workers responds and says, we're coming. We're going to get you. And that sort of thing.
Well, they actually flipped the car because they heard the voice thinking that she was still alive. So because apparently it had landed on the hood. And so because they heard her voice, they flipped the car over. That's when they discovered, yes, she was definitely deceased. But apparently when the car was in that, upside down position, the car seat and the baby were just above that water level. And therefore the baby didn't drown also. That's an amazing story.
What do you make out of EVPs? Do you think that they're spirits, or are they some other sort of phenomena? Could they be
like dimension or something?
Well, I don't know. Yeah,
I'm open to anything really, because we don't know. Sometimes we've gotten literal, intelligent answers to questions, and sometimes you'll pick up something that's just very random, and it's almost like putting a puzzle together. What does this mean?
Well, tell us about some of at least two of your best cases.
When we were at Moon River Brewery in Savannah, Georgia, twice I got I've gotten many good EVP there, but down in the basement, I've gotten a lot of very interesting EVP. One time I got an old gentleman humming, and there was nobody down there except our team, and all the guys are younger. They were in their 20s, maybe early 30s. And then it was me and one other girl. So, we knew who was down there. And I got this, and I have it too, an older gentleman humming a tune, and it's kind of like, I've heard it so many times I could actually practically hum it, and would hope that one day that maybe someone would actually recognize it. And another time down there in that basement, we were doing recording, and not a lot was going on at that moment. So we didn't, we're like, well, we're going to move on since nothing's happening here. My friend had said that, and then there was a few minutes pause, and then I'm like, we're out of here. And in between that, when I was at home reviewing it, because of course we didn't hear it when we captured it, was this young Southern guy singing. He says, something's wrong, don't know what it is. It's very, very strange, and it was definitely not me or the other person who was down there.
Has anybody recognized any of those voices?
Not yet, and I've always wanted to go back to see if anybody does recognize it, especially the tune that the older gentleman was humming, because it definitely seemed like a specific tune. Mm-hmm. And then with the young guy, that might be a little bit harder. Another one that we got down there, though, that was a direct answer was my friend says, well, how many of there are you? And I'm paraphrasing because it was a while ago, but he says, how many of you are there? And then there's about a few second pause, and then this very old voice comes on and says, 100. Yeah.
Well, okay,
I picked up an old time gun as an EVP, and I know that doesn't make sense because it's technically not a voice. But we were at a house in South Georgia, and they had been having some very interesting activity, and a couple of the team members were up in the attic, and they called me to come let them out of the attic. So I set my recorder down and literally went around the corner, which if the wall wasn't there, it would have been a whole, maybe 4 feet. And you could hear the client, and she was sitting with her baby, and they were the only two in the room besides me. And you could hear them just kind of moving around, not saying anything. And again, you could hear me letting them out. And then as if there was a gun, and I mean like an old time single fire gun, over my recorder, it just, and it was, when I was reviewing it, I was just like, I can't believe I just heard what I heard. I was playing it for everybody. I was just like, what does this sound like to you? And I'd play it, and they're like, a gun. I'm like, yes. So I have gotten, that was very strange for me, definitely, because it wasn't a voice, but it was definitely not heard at the time when I captured it. So I always found that one very, very interesting.
Would you say that the these EVPs come in more often after? Are they associated with like a tragic death more often than not?
Um, I don't know that it necessarily has to do with that. It has to be a tragic death. I've picked up children several times. There's one location in Roswell that I've been to in Roswell, Georgia, and whenever we go to this location, I always pick up a little girl there, and it's interesting because she's always saying "mommy" or laughing and giggling, and it makes me wonder if maybe she thinks one of the girls on the team is her mother, because more times than not than I've been there, and we've not only got it on audio, but we've heard it audibly too. So it was as a disembodied voice, like literally between me and one of the girls when we were sitting in one of the rooms there. There were 4 of us, and 3 out of the 4 people heard it, and the 4th one, the only reason they didn't hear it is because they had their headphones on.
Any similarities between are there messages other than like not particularly personal messages, but do you think that the other side is trying to communicate, or is this all just random?
Not always. I mean, I've definitely had some that pertain to the conversations we were having, as far as maybe a name or something. I know when we were at a home in West Georgia, we were asking names, and my friend had actually captured this one.
We've got a voice that's going to take over, and it don't have to be good things to say.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with 2 of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Before we went on our last break, we were talking about EVPs and some of the ones that you've collected, Michele, and. Yes. You said something interesting, that some of these that you recorded, you actually heard audibly. Now, how do you think these others that you record, that you don't hear them until you go back and replay it afterwards, how do you think that these voices end up being recorded?
That's a very good question, and I mean, it may just have to do with frequency and vibration, and scientifically, I could not tell you how you can pick them up, and it's strange because, we were talking about the phone calls, and I think you guys have mentioned TVs, and people have picked up voices, coming out of TVs and stuff. Right. I work in the medical field by day, and I was one time listening to voicemails, and I was listening to this woman. She was just talking, and all of a sudden I heard this man say something, and it took me a second, and I thought, that just sounds so out of place. At first I thought she was maybe, he was talking to her or something. But then when I replayed it, and I replayed it several times, I'm like, she has no clue that voice is there. And this happened twice at the office that I worked at, where I was going through voicemails, and this other voice was on these voicemails. And of course, these people were completely unaware. And, I listened to them several times, and it made no sense. I think one of them said hello, and I can't remember what the first one said. But it was just very strange, because I thought, are these EVPs, because they were in these voicemails, and they were clearly not background noise from the other phone call. It was very strange.
Well, I have a little story. Back years ago, when I was just beginning my career in broadcasting on the other side of the microphone, I must have been on 1,000 different shows, And one of the shows was Long John Nebel. He was actually the first all-night talk show that started from midnight, and he went till 5:30 in the morning, I think 6 or 7 days a week. But of course, it was more than just him and a guest. He had on like 5 or 6 panelists and then a guest, and you got a half an hour break in the middle of the night, and they brought in big sandwiches from Sarge's Deli, which I'm still trying to get this show to do, but hasn't that and the chocolate egg cream, but we haven't got that far yet. But anyway, Long John, as his career wore on, he got rather ill. He would still show up, in time to do the show, and he was in a wheelchair. He had cancer, but he managed to get through most evenings. But when he didn't, he was married. His fifth wife was a model by the name of Candy Jones, who was very well known at the time, one of the top models in America. And in fact, there's a book written about her. It's not the Manchurian Candidate, but she was supposed to be one of these like MK Ultra spies who was being hypnotized, and she was carrying messages and stuff without even realizing what she was doing. Anyway, Long John kind of poo-pooed the subjects, even though he had the guest on, like a couple of nights a week. People like George Adamski and George Van Tassel and Truman Bethune, who claimed they had gone out for rides on board UFOs. That was kind of his main theme, and it was what made his career. Even though he was kind of sarcastic, certainly off the air more so than on the air about most of these things. Like he said, he didn't buy it, but he was selling it certainly. Anyway, Candy would take over the show a couple of nights a week, particularly on a Sunday night. Especially after Long John passed away, she continued to do the show for quite some time. And she would have me on Sunday nights. I guess, frankly, she probably just couldn't get any other guest after a while. But, I would come on and we'd sit there and we would talk for 5 hours and take some phone calls and so forth. Now, she told me of an incident off the air. Again, she was not a big believer in any of this, but she was carrying on the tradition of her husband, Long John Neville. She told me about how after John had passed away, she was going through a huge box of tapes of the shows to label them. Now, in those days, Tim, were they 10-inch reels?
Yeah, I think so. That would have been about right for broadcast.
Yeah,
quality.
huge magnetic tapes.
They were huge.
Not cassette tapes, not 8-track, not DVD. Huge tapes, broadcast quality.
Well, yeah, they were reel to reel.
Yeah, reel to reel, and very expensive equipment in the studio there. But she was going through them to since they were playing more and more of the old shows, she had to label them so that she could have on there what the guests were and what the topic was and so forth. And she's playing a tape, and she says in the middle of the tape, she hears the voice of her deceased mother calling her by her nickname, which she never told me what it was. And she said it was only her mother would use that name. And the tape, the sound of her mother on the tape only lasted for a few seconds at best. But she said she was positive that it was her mother. Her mother had never been in the studio in her life, and certainly never had access to the reel-to-reel tapes. But yet there was her voice in the middle of this recording. And, she said, well, I don't really want people to know this, but she said, once I pass away, if you want to talk about it or mention it, you can tell people what I've told you. And so I did wait till she passed, and then I've repeated the story several times. But Candy wouldn't lie about that. I mean, she just wasn't the person to make something up. And second of all, she just wouldn't care. I mean, I don't know. She just wasn't, that interested, but she thought it was very bizarre that the voice of her mother would come through. Now, Tim, do I see we have a text message from a listener?
Yeah, we got a couple of them, in fact.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, Trevor from Texas, Michelle, he wants to know, has yourself or any of your team members ever had physical scratches or marks or other things when you're doing an investigation? And what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you on one of these?
I don't think that anybody's ever had a scratch. I personally have not been scratched. I've had a bad response when me and my friend were in Charleston last year at the old jail there. Mm-hmm. And the moment I walked into the building, I was just very ill and sick throughout the whole tour. And once I left, I was fine again. There was a place Anthony's Fine Dining here in Buckhead in Atlanta. It's not a restaurant anymore, but it was originally a big plantation home built in the 1700s, and we had investigated there a couple times, and we would definitely get some activity there. Nothing, extreme. Mm-hmm. But what was strange is 2 out of 3 times I investigated there, I left and got violently ill. And it was after staying all night there, and it was just, and I didn't eat or anything, so it wasn't like it was related to food or anything, and it would be like flu-like symptoms for a week, and it could have totally been coincidence, but it was just strange that it was both times that I investigated at this one location, and then the third time we went back, we were going to stay overnight again, but my daughter went into labor and I had to leave, so we never, and it was funny because everybody was kind of waiting to see if I was going to get sick again, and I'm like, oh, gee, thanks, but and it was funny because I didn't stay all night either, but it was just always very, odd, so it was like that third time was going to be the charm possibly, but we never found out because I didn't end up staying overnight. But no one's really been scratched or anything. As far as like the scariest case we've ever done, it was more, it was a threatening, like a psychic threatening, almost like it's maybe I don't even know if that's a good way to put it. But one case we did that turned out to be demonic, even though it was not a possession, it was an oppression. It was bad enough. Mm-hmm. And I just felt very threatened. My fingernail broke off and I put it in my pocket because I was not leaving anything behind. It was an extreme case where this person's physical features changed, growling, it was very, very, very intense.
Wow.
Yeah. And and it's interesting because I've had dreams since, and everybody involved in the cases had dreams, since, not often, but sporadically, that go back to it. And I did have a very interesting experience. I do ghost tours at the Marietta Ghost Tour, mm-hmm. and I was relaying the story about this case to some girls who were very interested. They were young, maybe, late teens, early 20s. And so I was telling them this story. And it was the strangest thing. One of the girls, and I don't like to talk about the case too much, but I was telling them because they really, really wanted to hear it. And as I was telling them the story, one of the girls, she kind of got kind of weak and faintish, and she kind of leaned on a FedEx box. And it was strange because her head was down, and in a split second, I could just see like the side of her face, and her face changed, and it had this grin, like this just, when I say grin, it was not a nice grin. And I panicked because I almost felt like whatever I was talking about was there. And I almost turned to look behind me to yell for help. And then, I'm like, wait, there is no help. And then, this is all happening like within, just seconds. And then I turn back and the girl collapses and faints. She gets back up and, she's like, whoa, she didn't know what happened. And, I didn't, I'm just like, oh, have you eaten? And they said, well, yeah, it's been a while. It was 8. And that was just a couple hours ago. And I'm like, and I could tell they were totally freaked out. The other girls didn't see what I saw. But I just said, well, maybe you just need to go get her something to drink, and kind of sent them on their way. But it was just very strange because I literally saw this girl's face change, and the grin on her face was not her. And, I almost felt like it was some kind of residual effect or something from that one case that we did do. Oh, and that was very frightening. Of course, the case when it happened was very frightening. It made me second think about doing this, and continuing to do it. But I didn't give into it. And of course, I kept doing it because I love to do it. But it was just very, 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 very strange when that happened.
Okay, well,
and that was frightening. That was frightening.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Yeah, you don't take stuff like that very, lightly.
No, exactly. I don't
Well,
want to be like, always assuming there's something paranormal going on, because I think there's a fine line of, being interested and being obsessed. I think a lot of people who have problems with hauntings, even if it's minor activity, it could be blown up into a big thing because they become obsessed and, they want to keep researching, and when they should just be, ignoring it and telling, it to leave them alone, respectfully, of course. They want to study it, and then they wonder why they keep having problems, because it goes, from interest to obsession.
Hey, Tim, we have a question from Lori in California, do we?
Well, yeah, we got. Let's go to the question from Brenda first from Vegas, and Brenda wants to know whether or not, with a lot of these, the interest that's gone on in the formation of some of these, smaller paranormal groups that have caused some problems. She cites like one group that accidentally burnt down a building during an investigation, and Brenda wants to know is, have you seen, like communities or owners of buildings that they're starting to make them off limits, for investigators, or like ghost tours and things like that.
Yes. There's a building in Marietta Square, and the gentleman has let a few people come out, but they didn't keep their end of the bargain, like getting back to them with information, of what their findings and stuff were. And so he just, got a little put off, and he did actually not, kind of stop letting people come out, except on very, very rare occasion. And then I have heard stories where people have gone into locations and caused damage, and that's just unacceptable, of course.
Yeah, it kind of gives a black eye to all of you.
Yeah,
exactly. You've got
it trickles down throughout the community.
Well, yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, you've got groups like yours who, are trying to work within the law and, and, go into places, with permission. And then you have these others that are just, going crazy, so to speak. Well, okay. Now we also have a question from Lori, and she wants to know, has Michele and her team ever worked with a psychic? And, what's your take on using psychics during an investigation?
Well, we do have some psychics on the team, but we do not use them. We use them only more for our own personal tool within the group. Unless there was something that was absolutely able to be validated, then we're not going to put it in our report. We're really only going to put out there those Class A EVPs, the tangible evidence. So we don't want to have any second guessing. The last thing we want to do is give somebody information that their house is haunted, and it's not, I mean, we always go in looking for those plumbing problems and electrical problems and psychological problems, not that we're doctors, but if we can feel that any of these issues are present, then of course we're going to call in somebody that can handle what, of course, we're not qualified to do.
What do you look for when you go in to a place to verify that there is a legitimate crisis or event going on?
Well, it starts with a extensive interview with the client, with confidential questions, and then from there, if we deem that it needs, probably an investigation, we'll go out, and of course we'll do basic readings. So we're going to be looking for any high EMF, out of place EMF, things that could be causing some of their claims. We're looking for a natural explanation first. We're not going in looking for the paranormal. We're looking for that natural explanation first. And if we could rule that out satisfactorily, then we'll be going, it's time to take a second look at what might really be going on. It's really hard to prove anything like that in a few hours of someone's, life and being in their home, especially knowing the nature of something like that. Mm-hmm. If we feel that there is something going on, we always put it out there that we are more than willing to stick with them as long as they need us and come out as much as they need us, bring in other help if we don't feel qualified to bring in.
Do you have any people of letters, academia on your in your group?
How do you mean?
Well, I mean, credential-wise, are you all
Oh,
lay
you mean as far as
investigators
the
or?
paranormal
Yeah,
credentials?
yeah,
No, just lots of years of experience. We're all pretty much professionals by day,
yeah.
but everybody in the group comes in with a lot of experience of working in the paranormal for many, many years. In some cases, decades. So that with learning experience and then just studying, and of course, being out there and networking, you you tend to learn a lot that way.
I've had one question that I was dying to ask you, and Holly, who of course isn't on the show because of the storm in her area. Do you think that women perceive paranormal and ghostly phenomena any different than men do?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I've not ever noticed a difference, really.
Are
I
are
mean,
more women willing to believe?
no, not necessarily. I know, our team really takes a tough look at natural explanation. That be the women just as much as the
Yes.
men.
Okay.
You know, before we're going to put it on a report.
Mhm.
And we don't. We the team will go over the audio together. The team leads will go over the lead investigators will usually go over all the audio together, plus the people involved in the investigation, because we immediately want to rule out, especially with audio or video, that it's not natural causes or one of us. The last thing you want to do is tell someone who's scared to live in their own home that the EVP, they have is a ghost and it's actually someone in the background stomach,
Sell your
so.
pro- sell your pro- sell your property very cheap to me.
So we don't, we we're very, very careful about what we release. We have to be
Well,
convinced
do
that
you
it,
have does your
it's
group have like meetings or seminars? How exactly do you share your information?
well. The thing with us is that a large majority of the cases are private homes, so
Uh,
therefore confidentiality is a big thing. And so, unless they've signed a release saying that we can share our information, of course, we're going to honor it. So, we're not going to share anything
uh,
that unless we have, permission from them. And then again, that we're also confident in what we have, to put it out there to share
uh.
it.
Well, I see time is disappearing into the future. And Tim, we're going to have to close the show in a few minutes. Get back up to the top of the lighthouse, make sure that the light is on, and then head back to solid ground. But Michele, we want to give you a chance. Where can people get in touch with you? How do they find out about your work? And if they're active in the paranormal and live in your area, perhaps even hook up with the gang.
Yeah, I'm with Roswell, Georgia Paranormal Investigations, and that's RGPI for short. And we do have monthly meetings, mainly with the team, but we are getting out there and trying to be more out in the community as far as public appearances,
Uh-huh.
and trying to work on maybe getting some investigations for those who are curious, the
Yes.
layman, so to speak, so that in the future we may be able to take them to a place. Of course, a lot goes into it with liability and all parties,
Yes. Yes.
being on the
Uh-huh.
same page. But we are working on that for the future. But we do have a Facebook page, the Roswell, Georgia Paranormal Investigations. I'm
I
also
found you there.
on
I
Facebook.
found you there.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I'm on Facebook, of course, and Twitter, and all the social media, Instagram. So we're definitely out there. We welcome people coming on our site and asking us questions and emailing us. Sometimes people's issues can even be solved by just some practical
Well,
information.
and I'm sure you're looking for that ultimate case.
Oh, yeah. We'd be lying if we weren't saying that we weren't there for us, too. As much as we want to help people, we do want to learn from all of this also and just keep pushing it further and further to see where it goes.
Well, Michele, again, I want to thank you for being on. And we had a very, very interesting evening. We learned a lot. You have some fascinating case studies that you've been involved in. And to my co-host there in Indiana, Tim, try to have a great birthday over the weekend.
Thank you.
And
Happy
don't
birthday.
Don't eat too much cake, and don't drink too much wine unless you're going to save some for me. And once again, thanks to our producer, Tina Marie. And good night. This is Tim Beckley. We'll see you all next week.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.